Hello and welcome to my channel, I Win to Lose Gaming. Our first playable bard, Ciaccona, has arrived in Wuthering Waves, providing a wide array of supporting capabilities mainly for erosion, but a little bit for frazzle as well. Ciaccona also puts the harm in harmonious singing, dealing some decent damage herself. Ciaccona is a promising character who will likely be part of an incredibly powerful upcoming erosion-based team. In this ultimate guide video, you'll learn everything you need to know about Ciaccona.
Listen, the trio of destiny. Thanks for watching.
Lend me your power.
Quick note, this video was filmed on the media server and things may be subject to change upon the official release. Please check the comments below to see if anything changed. As usual, we'll go through her kit, rotation, echoes and stats, best weapons, sequences and investment priority, teams, a showcase, and finally, my opinion on Ciaccona at the end of the video.
Listen, the trio of destiny.
To start Ciaccona's performance, we have her basic attacks. Most notably, her basic attack 4 is the most important part of it. Not only does it generate 1/3 of her forte bar, and it applies 1 stack of arrow erosion, it also generates this hologram clone of her. This clone persists for a very long time, and while it's on field, it will provide nearby resonators with a 24% arrow damage boost. Now, a very unique property of this clone is that if you cancel her basic 4 early on in its animation, the clone will actually finish the basic 4 for you. And if you used a dash to cancel her basic 4, she can follow it up with basic 3. Allowing her to very quickly spam basic 4s. This is a rather useful tech that I recommend practicing to shorten her rotation, and fortunately you can practice this in the overworld. The trick here is to wait a tiny bit after Ciaccona disappears during her basic 3 animation, which indicates that her basic 4 has started, and then dash to cancel basic 4's animation. You'll know if you did it correctly because the clone will finish the attack and you'll follow this up with her basic 3. Once Ciaccona has her full 3 forte bar, her heavy attack is replaced with her forte attack, which applies a stack of erosion, generates a lot of concerto, and also helps group up enemies. Up next we have her resonance skill, which is pretty simple and just applies a stack of erosion. It also leads to basic 2 for what it's worth. Then at last we have her resonance liberation, where she performs a mini concert in the middle of combat.
Listen, the trio of destiny.
This liberation has a lot of unique properties, with her being able to continuously apply arrow erosion or spectrofrazzle. By keeping her on field for a bit, you'll be greeted by this QuickTime event where you can pick between the left or right icon. The right one allows her to constantly apply arrow erosion to nearby enemies, while the left one switches her to apply spectrofrazzle. By default, without performing this QuickTime event, she will apply erosion to nearby enemies. Of course, even after swapping off, she will continue her concert to apply whatever status you chose to nearby enemies. One important note is that swapping back to her cancels her concert early. Anyway, up next we have her intro skill, which applies 1 stack of erosion and gives 1 forte, and also leads to her basic 3, shortening her rotation substantially. And finally, her outro skill provides a 100% arrow erosion damage amplify. This is clearly an outro skill designed for a future character, similar to how Phoebe's was designed for Zani. Like perhaps this might be for a certain upcoming Sentinel. Speaking of erosion, let's briefly talk about it. Erosion's multiplier actually scales up faster at certain points, making the jump from 3 stacks of erosion to 6 stacks of erosion 2.5 times the damage instead of just 2 times. Arrow Rover's outro actually increases the max stack of erosion from 3 to 6, making Ciaccona potentially do a decent amount of erosion damage on her release. Erosion deals an instance of damage every 3 seconds, and it takes 15 seconds for a stack of erosion to decay off the enemy. So yeah, we are likely going to see even more erosion focused mechanics in the future. And with Arrow Rover, Ciaccona can potentially deal some solid erosion damage. Although I actually need to confirm this on release, and if this is not the case, I'll leave that in a pinned comment down below. For her talent priority, level up her liberation, then her forte, normal attack, followed by her skill, and lastly her intro skill. Now frankly, she has a lot of additional options, but this is enough to get us started with her cookie cutter rotation. First, you want to intro her onto the field, then perform basic 3, and then basic 4 and dash cancel the basic 4 as early as you can. And if you dash canceled correctly, now you'll go into basic 3, where you can then perform basic 4 again. Next, you can use her resonance skill to cancel basic 4 as early as possible. And this is where I personally like to use her echo, or honestly you could have used it earlier if you wanted to, then use her forte, and finally her liberation. And now you can just outro to your DPS character. However, if you're using her on a frazzle team, after you use her liberation, just wait a bit to switch to her frazzle mode by timing the button on the left, and then outro to your main DPS. So yeah, that should be enough to get you started with her rotation. Of course, you can dodge counter as needed and weave in some basics here and there, and while these options might take a bit longer, they'll still get you to her destination all the same.
Thanks for watching.
Lend me your power.
Up next, we have Ciaccona's Echoes, and stats and stuff. Ciaccona has a pretty obvious set that was designed for her, the Gust of Welkin. The 2-piece bonus provides 10% arrow damage, and inflicting arrow erosion increases arrow damage for all resonators on the team by 15%, which obviously Ciaccona does, and provides an additional 15% arrow damage to Ciaccona herself. For the 4-cost Echo, the Reminiscence Fleur de Lis is the way to go, providing her with arrow damage bonus and taking no cast time. And as usual for the main stat, either crit rate or crit damage, whichever helps balance your crit ratio. And FYI, for her signature pistols, it's usually crit damage. Now for the 3-cost Echoes, double arrow damage is her best option, and for the 1-cost Echoes, use attack percent. But as always, replacing one of the 3-cost Echoes with an attack percent Echo is a perfectly reasonable substitute, although replacing both arrow damages with attack percent tends to be a noticeable damage loss. Now in practice, I actually found myself preferring an energy recharge 3-cost Echo, despite losing a significant amount of her personal damage output. For many fights where it can honestly be hard to land every hit of your rotation for all the characters, Ciaccona was often lacking energy for her liberation, which for her, well, certainly is not ideal. So if consistency is preferred, an energy regen 3-cost Echo can be worth the loss in damage. Finally, she can use the Moonlit set with the Heron, and for certain teams, particularly Spectro-Frazzle teams, it's a decent choice. But for arrow teams, I recommend the Gust of Welkin set. Now for the substats, it's the usual crit rate, crit damage, attack percent, and energy recharge. While she technically just needs 115% energy recharge with certain teams like with Zani, and around 135% energy recharge with certain teams like Jiyan, as always, energy recharge is a moving target, so try to get it as much as you practically can and experiment with your team.
Listen, the trio of destiny.
Next we have Ciaccona's weapons, and they are quite straightforward. With her signature pistols, breaking news, the Woodland Area, surprisingly, is her best option. Not only does it increase her own attack by 12% and provide her with 24% arrow damage when she applies arrow erosion, it also shreds the enemy's arrow resistance by 10%, which enhances your entire team's arrow damage output. Her next best option is, Carlotta's pistols, the Last Dance, which just serves as a decent stat stick for her. And then we have the Static Mist, the standard 5-star pistols, which as usual is the next best option. And interestingly, Ciaccona can utilize the craftable pistols, Romance and Farewell, since she's always applying status effects to the enemy, making this better than most 4-star options in Wuthering Waves. And it sits at a usable 76-ish% of her signature pistol's damage output. And interestingly, because Ciaccona reliably and consistently applies debuffs, this actually allows for her teammates to also use the craftable debuff weapons. But of course, this weapon is missing that 10% arrow resistance shred, which is one of the main reasons why you get her signature weapon.
Thanks for watching.
Lend me your power.
Up next for the Bitcoin billionaires in my audience, we have Ciaccona's sequences and investment priority, Personally, I recommend going for her signature weapon first, as the 10% arrow resistance shred will be great for other arrow DPS characters as well as for herself. Then we have her sequence 1, which improves Ciaccona's damage and gives her a bit of interrupt resistance after she uses her resonance skill. And her sequence 2 is the big one, providing the team with 40% arrow damage. This is a good stopping point for Bitcoin millionaires, but for the billionaires, sequence 3 is useful as it can shorten her rotation time thanks to the additional forte that her basic 4 generates. It also makes her a more competent main DPS because now she's able to spam her forte more frequently. Sequence 4 improves her own damage a bit, and Sequence 5 improves her damage as well as provides 30% damage reduction to nearby party members, which is nice to avoid being one-shot by things like holograms. And finally, Sequence 6 further improves her damage. Overall, if you're looking to vertically invest, her signature weapon at Refinement 1 plus her Sequence 2 is a good stopping point for most of us.
Listen, the trio of destiny.
Okay, let's be real, we all know what Ciaccona's optimal team will look like soon enough. It'll be Ciaccona, perhaps Arrow Rover, and the most goated Arrow DPS of the past, present, and future, Alto. Okay, I'm obviously joking about that, but as of Ciaccona's release, I don't believe she has her optimal team yet, but she does have some decent team options, with the first being Gian. Ciaccona buffs arrow damage by a bit as well as deals some decent damage herself, so she's a viable teammate for Gian. And for the third slot, you can either use Arrow Rover or a more dedicated healer like Shorekeeper or Verena. While Gian will be doing much less damage than with Mortefi, Ciaccona does provide her own additional utility. Personally though, I think Ciaccona is probably a side grade for Gian, but it's a team that you can use in the meantime before replacing Gian with, never mind Gian, you're irreplaceable in our hearts as our first. Now Ciaccona can also continuously apply Spectrofrazzle, making her viable with Phoebe. What's nice about Ciaccona supporting DPS Phoebe is that she constantly applies Frazzle to newly spawning enemies, allowing Phoebe to be used much more effectively against multi-wave content like in Wuthering Wastes. Also, this is a situation where Ciaccona's damage is less impactful, so running Moonlit to buff Phoebe's damage is more viable here than in her Arrow variant teams. Of course, Ciaccona being a bit Frazzle-less can also provide some support for Zani. While not the best in slot option for Zani, she is a viable alternative to Phoebe. Granted, I think Zani does much better with her main team, but for those that don't have or want Phoebe, well, we have a usable alternative with Ciaccona. All in all though, it's clear as day that Ciaccona is designed for a future erosion DPS character, so please keep that in mind when allocating your resources and pulls. While she is usable, and in fact pretty decent with the current roster, Ciaccona's teams are clearly not complete, and to draw out her full potential, you can expect to pull for another character in the future.
Thanks for watching.
Lend me your power.
Alright, I've got a few quick showcase for you guys starring Ciaccona, with the first team being with Gian, and Ciaccona does indeed work with Gian because she provides Gian the arrow damage bonus. However, as mentioned in the team section, Gian himself will be doing much less damage than in comparison to with Mortefi because, Mortefi does have the heavy attack amplify. However, if you are looking for an alternative waifu to put on this team instead of Mortefi, well, Ciaccona is indeed a functional option. Although me personally, I do prefer Mortefi for this use case, but of course, as of right now, we don't have too many options when it comes to main Ciaccona teams as of her release, and we can definitely expect Ciaccona to get her full team perhaps in the near future. But for now, Gian is a perfectly usable character with Ciaccona, all things considered, and as we can see, she is doing just fine at providing, some additional sub DPS and damage for Gian, as well as for buffing Gian's damage output. And we are indeed able to clear this level 100 crownless in a very good amount of time. Of course, this is with, this pretty extreme buff when it comes to applying erosion. So do keep that in mind that these teams are indeed overperforming. But up next, we have a Sequence 0 Refinement 1 Phoebe team. And indeed, Ciaccona is a unique Frazzle support for Phoebe in the sense that Ciaccona actually has an advantage over, for example, Spectre Rover, in that she can continuously apply Spectrofrazzle to newly spawning enemies. So as we can see with these two annoying ball hat guys, which I always get wrecked by, these two things, she is applying Frazzle to them, so that way Phoebe doesn't have to do any funky swap shenanigans with Spectral Rover, and instead, she can just rely on Ciaccona to reapply Spectrofrazzle for Phoebe to amplify or to do a lot more damage. And, this is a pretty nice quality of life for Phoebe, especially in multi-wave content like Withering Wastes. Although do keep that in mind that Ciaccona's outro skill, which buffs erosion damage by 100%, obviously does not benefit Phoebe much at all, or, at all in any way. However, this is a viable alternative option for Phoebe teams, which is nice to have. Now, up next, we have Zani. And Zani is an interesting character when it comes to using her with Ciaccona. Indeed, it is what I would describe as viable. However, I do think Phoebe is much, much, much better with Zani, and this is purely because of Phoebe's 100% Frazzle damage amplify, which of course Zani deals a lot of Frazzle type damage. So in this case, while Ciaccona does indeed provide some Spectrofrazzle for Zani, I definitely recommend going for Phoebe in the long run. But as a stopgap, if you don't have Phoebe, this is indeed a viable teammate option and is perfectly capable of handling what I would describe as side tower situations, where some of the center towers, with Ciaccona, when it comes to being paired with Zani, it might be a little bit more difficult. However, against the Tempest Memphis here, a level 90 version of it, this team is doing absolutely fantastic, and this side also has Spectre damage buffs as well. But, perfectly reasonable performance, all things considered, considering Ciaccona isn't really the perfect support for Zani.
Listen, the trio of destiny.
So there you go, a full guide on Ciaccona. Ciaccona is the erosion damage buffer of Wuthering Waves and is designed with that future potential in mind. She's also a solid sub DPS and support for some of the current roster as well, which is surprisingly nice. Let me know what you think about Ciaccona down in the comments below and whether or not you're pulling for her. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Want to Lose, signing out.